Chapter 1544. Lan Mofeng frowned and said, "Everyone don't act rashly." The remaining people of the Lan clan all obeyed and didn't act rashly. This was Diwu Qingrou's order. No matter how they fought, they must definitely not do anything risky. They would rather miss the opportunity than take unnecessary risks. For the Lan clan now, every bit of combat power was precious. Besides, it didn't belong to the Lan clan now, but to Diwu Qingrou's main force. How could they lose it so easily? With the Xiao clan and Yi clan taking the lead, Miao Zhendong and the other law enforcement experts also moved and charged forward. Firstly, Miao Zhendong was more or less embarrassed. After all, he was the one who retreated first, but caused such a huge loss. And in the end, the other party was just bluffing. Secondly, the Xiao clan and Yi clan had already charged forward head-on. It wouldn't be right if he didn't move. Besides, he wasn't facing them head-on, so the risk was definitely much lower. In an instant, over 2,000 people surrounded them from all directions, forming an encirclement once again. Bluffing? Still trying to play tricks when you're about to die? Miao Zhendong sneered. Hurry up and kill them. Let them go on the road together. Let their souls go to the spring. Play tricks. Alright, I'll show you a good trick today. That Li clan supreme martial artist laughed loudly. Seeing Xiao Zhenyan, Yi Xiaoyao, Miao Zhendong and the rest charging toward them, he roared. Li clan! They want to watch a good show. Everyone, put your lives on the line and fight for the price. Right now. Together in life and death. Roar. Together in life and death. They roared in unison and shouted. Together in life and death. In unison. Just as some of the allied forces were still mocking the Li clan for bluffing and trying to be mysterious, a blinding white light suddenly flashed in front of them. Then an earth-shattering explosion suddenly detonated. There was a deafening explosion. The 77 people of the Li clan turned into the purest energy in the world at the same time. When they were compressed to the maximum, they suddenly exploded. They didn't retreat at all. They didn't hesitate at all. They didn't hesitate at all. At the last moment, they didn't even shout any slogans, just to give the enemy a surprise. What a wonderful performance! What heroic acting skills! What an unprecedented trick! Xiao Zhenyan was the fastest out of everyone. Almost as soon as he rushed over, his long sword energy was about to touch the enemy's body. In fact, it had already touched one of the enemies. However, at this moment, the explosion began. Therefore, he was naturally the one with the highest death toll among all the allied forces. Xiao Zhenyan did not have any ability to resist, and was blown into a cloud of dust. Yi Xiaoyao's cultivation was above Xiao Zhenyan's. He arrived right after Xiao Zhenyan, and turned into ashes almost at the same time, dissipating between heaven and earth. They were brothers in the same boat, and they died together. There was also Miao Zhendong. Due to his embarrassment, he was eager to show off and save face. This time, he was the fastest among the law enforcement officers. Naturally, he was not spared. Before the mocking expression on his face could fade away, he was turned into minced meat. 2 peak-level 8th grade supreme martial artists, 3 to 4 7th grade supreme martial artists, 7 to 8 middle grade supreme martial artists, and the rest were all 3rd grade and above supreme martial artists. A total of 77 people exploded together. Although the number of people exchanged for this explosion was far less than the previous 8,000 people, the quality was far more than that by hundreds or even thousands of times. Such joint explosion power, as long as it was controlled within a certain range, even a middle-grade supreme martial artist could only die with regret. Not to mention an 8th grade cultivator? How could he not die? The 1,000 or so people from the allied forces, who were closer to the front, evaporated, without a trace, almost at the same time. This included the 8th grade supreme martial artist experts, from the various clans and law enforcement officers. This kind of super expert, who could dominate the world, died so easily in this battle. It was as if it was a joke, and he died just like that. On the other side, Dong Wushang's eyes were red. Big brother, are we really not participating in the battle? Chu Yang's heart was heavy. He said in a low voice, "No. Before the Li clan is annihilated, we will not participate in the battle. It's not because we are heartless, but this is the glory of the Li clan. Li Chuanbua solemnly entrusted this task to us in order to fulfill the last glory of the Li clan. This is a battle of heroes. This moment belongs only to the grandson of the Li clan. No one else is allowed to destroy it. Everyone understood this principle. They also understood it. But now, seeing such a heroic battle, everyone still felt hot all over, as if their blood was boiling. They are finally all dead. Li Chuanbua's face was as calm as an ancient well. He said, "Second brother, you have miscalculated this time. Your subconscious urging has become your grandson's soul-chasing order. Now everyone is finally dead. Are you happy?" At this point in the battle, there were already 2 sword marks on his body. Sword marks that could injure a middle-grade supreme martial artist could only be created by a middle-grade supreme martial artist. Fresh blood soaked through his snow-white robe. Chu Xiangge had more injuries on his body, while Xiao Qinyu's face was only slightly paler, but there were no major injuries. Obviously, he had a great advantage. Li Chuanbua's cultivation was roughly at the middle-grade level, while Chu Xiangge was only at the beginner level of a middle-grade supreme martial artist. However, Xiao Qinyu was at the advanced level of a middle-grade supreme martial artist, very close to the peak level. Although it was only a small level, in a battle of such a level, it was already an insurmountable moat. In the path of martial arts, the higher the level, the greater the difference between each level. Although Xiao Qinyu was only a little higher than Li Chuanbua, in a battle, it was not difficult for him to take on Li Chuanbua and Chu Xiangge alone. 1 against 2, he was at ease and even had the upper hand. Even if another middle-grade opponent came, he could handle it with ease. Therefore, at the beginning of the battle, Li Chuanbua said, "Second brother, please send me off." That was because he himself knew that he was definitely not Xiao Qinyu's match. But if he really wanted to die, in the entire northwestern enemy territory, other than Xiao Qinyu, there was really no one who was qualified to kill him, and had the ability to kill him. Therefore, dying in Xiao Qinyu's hands was also a worthy death. Xiao Qinyu also understood this point. But at this moment, Xiao Qinyu was obviously a little confused. His order just now had contributed to the deaths of Xiao Jingyan, Yi Xiaoyao and the others. In the blink of an eye just now, more than 1,000 people there had died under his order. Hearing Li Chuanbua's words now, he couldn't help but blush. Suppressing the pain in his heart, he pretended to be calm and said coldly, "You'd better worry about yourself." Then, he attacked with a domineering sword, sweeping everything in its path. Li Chuanbua actually didn't dodge. His sword swept across the sky and blocked Xiao Qinyu's attack. A clang shook the sky. He laughed loudly and said, "I wanted second brother to send me off in the first place. What's there to worry about? If I really had to worry, wouldn't it be contradictory?" Xiao Qinyu finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish. Send my greetings to Uncle Li on the road to the netherworld." Li Chuanbua's heart ached, and he said furiously, "Xiao Qinyu, we've been friends for generations. It's one thing for us to turn against each other after 10,000 years, but now you actually dare to insult your elders?" The moment Xiao Qinyu said that, he felt that something was wrong. There was no lack of regret in his heart. But now that the enemy was clear, there was no point in explaining further. He simply shut his mouth and didn't speak anymore. However, the sword in his hand became even more urgent, pressuring Li Chuanbua and Chu Xiangge until they couldn't breathe. At this point, most of the people from the Li clan were already dead. There were only 2 battlefields left below. They were Li Xiangxi, Li Zhua and Li Yu, as well as 2 other 8th-grade supreme martial artists, who were besieged by the enemy. Seeing 77 people turn into green smoke and explode, Li Xiangxi's eyes were filled with tears. He laughed maniacally and said, "Good. Li clan. Li clan. That's it. That's how it should be." Li Zhua and Li Yu cheered at the same time. They laughed loudly and were full of vigor. The 3 of them laughed maniacally, their expressions becoming more and more deranged. Under the stimulation of the heroic self-destruction of their descendants around them, the 3 of them had gradually become more and more willing to die. With a bang, Li Xiangxi was hit again. He felt as if his internal organs were being burned by fire. The pain penetrated his heart, and he couldn't take it anymore. Before the sound had died down, Two more deafening explosions rang out almost at the same time. Li Xiangxi only felt something cold fly into his mouth. The smell of blood was strong. Turning his head to look, he couldn't help but open his eyes wide. Ah! With a roar, he finally spat out a mouthful of blood that he had been suppressing. The two people who self-destructed were the remaining two 8th-grade supreme martial artists of the Li clan. Faced with the siege of dozens of 8th-grade supreme martial artists, and even 2nd-grade supreme martial artists, the two of them couldn't avoid killing the enemy. Without any hesitation, they self-destructed together, sacrificing their lives in exchange for the enemy's casualties. In a sea of flesh and blood, although there were as many as 20 high-level supreme martial artists working together to set up a defense, there were still more than 300 people who died in this explosion at the same time. There were even 3 8th-grade supreme martial artists who were too close to the explosion and were directly crippled. 3 arms and 4 legs were separated from their bodies at the same time. At this point, there were only 2 places left in the entire battlefield where the fight was still going on. One was in mid-air, where Chu Xiangge and Li Chuanbo were working together to fight Xiao Qinyu. The other was below, where Li Zhuo, Li Yu and Li Xiangxi were heavily surrounded. The situation of the 3 people below was obviously not good. In front and behind them, there were already high-level supreme martial artist experts. The weakest among them was also a 7th-grade supreme martial artist. Roughly counting, there were about 50 of them. They formed a circle like an iron bucket. The encirclement was complete, and there was no way to break out. As for the remaining martial artists with slightly lower cultivation, they were all rushed to clean up the battlefield and rescue the injured. There was no room for them to intervene in either of these 2 battlefields. At this moment, the battle was basically over. The so-called cleaning up of the battlefield actually didn't require much cleaning. Other than those who were seriously injured but still had a life, the rest had already turned into ashes. In the entire battlefield, there wasn't even a complete corpse to be found. The cruelty and blood of the battle was uniform. Sabers and swords fell like rain. At the same time, another 8th-grade supreme martial artist flew over on his sword. The sword light was like rolling lightning, connecting the sky and piercing into the battle circle of Li Xiangxi and the others without any warning. Suddenly, the aura of death completely enveloped the entire space. Chapter 1545. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. With a blood-curdling scream, Li Zhuo tumbled out in a bloody mess. In that instant of contact, he had already been struck by thousands of swords and was almost reduced to a skeleton. There was no chance for him to self-destruct at all. Immediately after, hundreds of swords and saber lights fell at the same time. Before he could even scream, Li Zhuo had already turned into nothingness. The triangular formation that he had barely managed to hold on was instantly broken through by force. Azwa, Li Yu roared and suddenly charged out without any regard for his life. Li Zhuo and Li Yu were originally twin brothers with similar natures and cultivation. They had been together for more than 10,000 years and were inseparable. Now that he had suddenly lost the other person, Li Yu only felt that all his hopes had turned to dust. Even his eyes had become blurry. The 10,000-year twin brothers joined hands, as if they had the help of the gods. Their tacit understanding was unparalleled in the world. But this was also their weakness. As long as one of them died, the other would naturally collapse as well. The opposing supreme martial artist looked at Li Yu, who was charging over unconsciously. A cruel look appeared in his eyes. 4 8th-grade supreme martial artists and 2 2nd-grade supreme martial artists faced Li Yu at the same time. Any one of them would not be much weaker than Li Yu in a one-on-one fight. With such a person blocking the way, even if Li Yu self-destructed, he would definitely be blocked by another person. Li Yu howled loudly. Ignoring the swords on his body, he pounced forward as if he wanted to hug the blood mist in the air, just like how he had hugged his younger brother all these years. Azwa, I will go with you to see father and mother. Li Yu roared, tears streaming down his face. 4 swords stabbed into his body at the same time. Li Yu seemed to be unaware. He just opened his arms and caught the blood mist in the air. A childish smile appeared on his face. Let's go see father and mother together. At this moment, Nothing was more important than hugging his brother. The tyrannical power of 4 supreme martial artists exploded in his body. Liu did not make a sound, and instantly turned into a rain of blood. Ah! Li Xiangxi roared into the sky. His eyes turned blood red in an instant. The sacrifice of his tribesmen made Li Xiangxi completely lose his mind. For the past 10,000 years, a kind of violent and destructive emotion that had never been felt before rose violently. Li Xiangxi roared wildly. At this moment, he had forgotten everything and no longer had any misgivings. As for the meeting in the next life, as well as the yearning that was etched into his bones, he didn't care about it at all. There was only destruction, revenge. The people in front of him were the culprits behind the destruction of his home. His family had died in the hands of these people. If he didn't take revenge, how would he have the face to live in this world? Li Xiangxi roared furiously. The yearning sword in his hand suddenly shattered into pieces. He took a deep breath and roared into the sky. His entire body suddenly swelled up. Stop him! A mid-level supreme martial artist of the allied forces roared. Li Xiangxi had already reached the peak of the 8th grade supreme martial artist realm. At this moment, the few high-level supreme martial artists of the allied forces were all recovering their energy after the intense exhaustion. Once they exploded, it would definitely cause devastating destruction. Everyone stepped forward at the same time. If they didn't step forward now, they might be the ones to be buried with him. At this moment, Li Chuanbo was being pressured by Xiao Qinyu to the point that he couldn't catch his breath. Suddenly, he heard a despairing roar coming from below. His heart suddenly jolted, and he turned to look down. He saw Li Xiangxi roaring into the sky and swords falling from all directions like rain. With a loud roar, Li Chuanbo suddenly abandoned Xiao Qinyu and rushed down like a meteor. His back was exposed. Xiao Qinyu casually swung his sword. The sword aura burst forth like thunder and shot into Li Chuanbo's back with a thud. To think that the success of this sword attack would come so easily. Even Xiao Qinyu was stunned for a moment by this unexpected success. Even he himself couldn't believe it. Although his cultivation was far superior to Li Chuanbo's, if he wanted to kill him, he would have to fight a long battle. But now he had succeeded so easily. At this moment, Li Chuanbo's back had suffered a fatal injury. But as if he didn't feel anything, he continued to fly down like a meteor. Why couldn't he self-destruct? Self-destruct meant that his soul would be destroyed. What about the regret of 10,000 years and the yearning of a lifetime? I have destroyed his happiness, but I have to give him hope in the next life. The next moment, Li Chuanbo was already howling and rushing into the forest of swords and sabers like a hurricane. Countless swords and sabers fell on him like raindrops, but they were all forcefully sent flying by his powerful cultivation. He arrived in front of Li Xiangxi like a gust of wind. Li Xiangxi had already compressed all his cultivation and was about to perish together with the enemy. Suddenly, his father appeared in front of him. He couldn't help but be shocked. You, rebel! Li Chuanbo struck his dantian with a palm. Have you suffered the pain of yearning for 10,000 years for nothing? The power of this palm actually dispersed all the essential qi that Li Xiangxi had compressed to the limit. Li Xiangxi was about to speak when Li Chuanbo had already struck his head with a palm. Son, if there is a next life, don't yearn bitterly. Don't blame your muddle-headed father. With a crack, Li Xiangxi's brain burst open. At the last moment, Li Chuanbo personally struck and killed his son. At this moment, the countless experts of the allied forces were all dumbfounded. They really didn't dare to believe what they were seeing. For a moment, they didn't know how they should react. What the hell was going on? Li Xiangxi's self-destruction was already a foregone conclusion. They were already powerless to stop it. But the person who suddenly appeared to stop it was actually Li Chuanbo, Li Xiangxi's biological father. Not only did he stop his son's final self-destruction to pay the price, he even personally killed him with a palm strike. Li Chuanbo let out a loud roar. He picked up his son's body, which still had half a breath left, and leaped into the air. Throwing him far away, he shouted, "Tribulation Sword Master, please." From afar, Chuyang said solemnly, "Elder, don't worry. Xiangxi won't miss you in the next life." Roar! A powerful dragon roar broke through the air. Aoshin leaped into the air and somersaulted in the air. Suddenly, there was a burst of golden light in the sky. A huge golden dragon that was hundreds of feet long suddenly appeared. Soaring Golden Dragon. The supreme technique of the Golden Dragon Secret Manual. With Aoshin's current cultivation, he could only use one move. Moreover, he could only use it once before he would be exhausted. But at this moment, he only needed this one instant. The huge golden dragon entered the air above the battlefield at lightning speed. It caught Li Xiangxi's body in the air and turned to leave. The speed at which it came and went was a blasphemy to even describe it as lightning. That was a speed that surpassed the limits of speed. Godly speed. Chu Yang had also leaped forward to meet it. The two of them met in the air. The heaven-nourishing jade and the heavenly orchid were sent into Li Xiangxi's mouth at the same time. A shadow suddenly appeared above Li Xiangxi's head with a whoosh. Amidst the gloomy clouds, the white smoke of this shadow was exceptionally clear. Li Chuanbo flew over as if he was flying, staring intently at that shadow. Tears suddenly fell from his eyes like rain. At this moment, Li Chuanbo was just an old man, a father who wanted to send his son on a long journey. That was all. That shadow's features were clear. It was Li Xiangxi. Although Li Xiangxi was already dead, his primordial spirit was preserved and his consciousness was still intact. At this moment, he looked at his father, his eyes full of deep admiration and reluctance. His figure twisted, and he actually knelt down in the air and kowtowed to Li Chuanbo a few times. Li Chuanbo staggered in the air. He laughed and said, "Go, my child. Remember, don't yearn bitterly in your next life. Father's heart aches very much. You've suffered for love in this life and yearned for 10,000 years. Father's heart also feels like it's being cut by a knife, and I've regretted it for 10,000 years. Go, my child. When you see your wife, tell her that I've acknowledged her. I've wronged you in this life, but I can't make up for it. What a pity, what a pity. Ha ha ha." As Li Chuanbo laughed, he turned around and left. He rushed toward Xiao Qinyu and Chu Xianga, who were fighting fiercely in the air. He actually didn't turn back. Only at the places where he passed by, drops of tears fell together with the blood and disappeared without a trace. My child, in your next life, you must be happy. Don't yearn bitterly. Smile lightly in your life, and don't worry in your life. Li Xiangxi's illusory figure knelt in the air and kowtowed repeatedly. He wanted to speak, but he could not speak now. In the end, his body involuntarily rose into the air. That kneeling illusory figure remained kneeling until he completely disappeared into the horizon. Father, I don't blame you anymore. Although you didn't check the truth when you objected back then, your original intention was for my own good. I will definitely remember your words. Don't worry. He didn't say these words out loud, but everyone who saw this scene could clearly feel it from the bottom of their hearts. Li Chuanbo killed me personally at the last moment, but preserved my soul and gave me a chance to live without regrets. Today, at this very moment, the fate between father and son finally came to an end. Li Chuanbo wanted to turn back countless times, wanting to take another look at his son's shadow, but he didn't. He just stood silently in front of Xiao Qinyu again. Seeing that Li Chuanbo had returned, Xiao Qinyu also stopped unexpectedly. The three of them stood in the air in a triangle, bidding farewell to Li Xiangxi's soul that had disappeared. No matter what, Xiao Qinyu wouldn't disturb them at this moment. Although he still wanted to kill Li Chuanbo eventually, he definitely wouldn't do it at this moment. The battle situation below had completely calmed down. Only the three of them, and the last battle of this battle had yet to come to an end. Li Chuanbo's eyes were full of gratification and a strange glow. His body swayed inexplicably and he said, "Second brother Xiao, it's time." Xiao Qinyu's expression was solemn. He nodded slightly and said, "Brother, have a safe journey. Forgive me for not seeing you off." The sword flashed and pierced into Li Chuanbo's heart once again. It just stopped there and didn't move. Li Chuanbo didn't make any movement to dodge. He didn't even have the thought of dodging. He just lowered his head and looked at the sword in his chest with a bitter smile. He reached out and gripped the sword tightly. Blood flowed from his chest and from his hand, dripping down. He raised his head and smiled calmly. I originally thought that if Xianga and I self-destructed at the end, even if we couldn't kill you, We would at least make you suffer injuries that you wouldn't be able to recover from for decades. But when it came to it, we still didn't. Haha. Chapter 1546. Xiao Qinyu took a deep breath, a hint of guilt in his eyes as he said, I understand. Until the moment of your death, you still recognized me as your second brother. But I killed you with my own hands. I am the one who let you down. You have no regrets in this matter, but I will regret it for the rest of my life. If I had a choice, I would rather be injured. Li Chuanbua smiled lightly and said, If you were injured, it would be my turn to feel regret. Actually, I have long known that all of you no longer treat me as a brother. But I still, he smiled lightly. Second brother, when I die, I have to be buried with you. Let this sword of yours be buried with me. Xiao Qinyu let go of the sword hilt and drifted backward. Brother. Tears finally fell uncontrollably. Li Chuanbua chuckled, as if he still wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Then, his whole body suddenly exploded silently, turning into a blazing white flame that burned in the air. A middle-grade supreme martial artist had turned his soul, consciousness, and divine thoughts into a blazing flame at this moment. Just as he had said earlier, I am already extremely tired of this world. Even if there is a chance for a next life, I don't want it. If even a brother of 10,000 years could betray him, what else could be real? I don't want such a world. The white flame burned in the air, and Xiao Qinyu's treasured sword actually melted in it. Bit by bit, it turned into molten iron. In the end, even the molten iron disappeared bit by bit. Everything returned to nothingness. Chu Xiangji's wrist shook, and the black saber in his hand suddenly made a sad sound and broke. He looked up and laughed loudly. A brother for a day, a brother for life. Even if your other brothers don't accompany you, I, Chu Xiangge, will. You will always have a good brother. Li Chuanbua, I want to tell you solemnly that you still have a brother in this life. A real brother. Chu Xiangge laughed loudly, and turned to look at Xiao Qinyu, his eyes full of contempt and disdain. He shouted, As for the others, they are not worthy to be your brothers. It's not that you don't have any brothers. His body floated up, and he rushed toward the blazing white flame without any hesitation. With a whoosh, the blazing white flame suddenly doubled in size. In just a moment, Chu Xiangji's whole body disappeared in the flame without a trace. In the end, the two middle-grade supreme martial artists didn't even choose to kill the enemy. Instead, they burned themselves. Both of them were extremely arrogant people. Since death was a foregone conclusion, it was meaningless to drag some ants down with him. More importantly, they didn't deserve it. Secondly, it was also a silent request. We've already shown you mercy. Then, the hundreds of thousands of women and children of the Li clan, do as you see fit. If he wanted to kill them, he would kill them. Chapter 1550. Old Madame Li's face became more and more unpleasant. She really wanted to slap this evil creature to death. But first, Li Ju was the only one alive in front of them. Second, they were still grandfather and grandson. Old Madame Li doted on this grandson, so she really couldn't bear to do it. At this moment, a burst of wild laughter came from afar. Ha ha ha. So everyone is here. Since you've all gathered here, you've saved this old man a lot of effort. Since you're so tactful, I'll definitely let you go on your way happily and reunite with your family. When Li Ju heard this, he immediately lost control again. In a panic, he actually squeezed into the group of women and said incoherently, They're here, they're here. Who will protect me? Quick, quick, quick. I want to run. Help. Shut up, you bastard. Old Madame Li shouted. Her voice was not loud, but it was very majestic. Hundreds of thousands of people heard the enemy's movements with their own ears. Grief appeared on their faces at the same time. Their last hope was dashed just like that. The enemy had come to the heart of the Li clan. This proved that their own family members had all been killed. Otherwise, why would they come here? How could they come here? However, in addition to their grief, each and every one of them puffed out their chests. There was not the slightest bit of fear. Instead, there was a kind of joy of being free. They went, and it would be our turn later. Although we are weak, we are still strong. Li family, Even if we die, what is there to fear? People came one after another. Chen Jianlong was in the lead. He was very proud and arrogant. He shouted with his nose in the air. Tell me, where are the treasures of the Li family? Just hand them over, and I will let you die quickly. Don't make yourself suffer. It is not a good feeling. Be smart. Old Madam Li said calmly. Who are you? Please tell me your name. Although the Li family has never cared about treasures, if you want the Li family's treasures, you have to see if you are qualified. Old Madam Li raised her head. Her white hair was fluttering, and her eyes were sharp. She said coldly, not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can take over the Li family's treasure. Chen Jianlong snorted coldly. Old lady, who are you? Old Madam Li smiled. This is the Northwest, the territory of the Li family. This is the Li family. Honey, I'm asking you, who are you? Chen Jianlong was furious. The Northwest of the Li family? This was the Li family? Perhaps it was still the Li family now. But it might not be the case in a while. The men of the Li family were all dead. Even the patriarch of the Li clan, Li Chuanbua, was dead. Do you think this is still the Li family's territory? You still insist on this question. What a joke. Old Madam Li suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed. She said in a shrill but heroic voice, there are not only men in the Li family, but also women. We are also members of the Li family. However, if the master of the Calamity Sword wanted to meddle in other people's business, he wouldn't be able to leave anytime. In that case, the people here could definitely keep the master of the Calamity Sword here forever. As long as they really cared about the women and children of the Li family, these people would be a great hindrance. Under such circumstances, even if Wu Jueqing were to take action, it wouldn't be of much use. Poison didn't have eyes, especially for those women and children who were weak. Once poison was used, they would definitely be the first to die. Therefore, Wu Jueqing would definitely have a lot of scruples. In this way, only a few people would have to face 5,000 high-level martial artists in a life-and-death battle. Even if you had great abilities, what could you do? Suddenly, a cold voice said abruptly, everyone take a step back. A thin figure suddenly appeared in the crowd of the Li family. A puff of green smoke rose. The few people at the front of the allied forces suddenly fell down. There were no exceptions. Poison. Everyone retreat. Chen Jianlong was the first to retreat. This figure that suddenly appeared was the poison doctor Wu Jueqing. It was the same poisonous smoke. The Li family was fine when they smelled it, but the allied forces were in a complete mess when they smelled it. Poison didn't have eyes, but Wu Jueqing did. Wu Jueqing's method of using poison was obviously beyond the imagination of ordinary people. He had already reached the level of a great grandmaster, where he could do as he pleased. He could poison whoever he wanted. He wouldn't casually implicate others. This was Wu Jueqing's method of using poison. With just a puff of green smoke as a barrier, he actually separated the Li family from the allied forces. Elder Wu, are you sure you want to make things difficult for us by doing this? Xiao Qinyu sat on the snow sleigh and asked cautiously. If he could avoid becoming enemies with Wu Jueqing, it was better not to. After all, the implications were too great. Looking at the vengeful gazes of the thousands of youths, if these 7,000 people with good aptitudes were to really mature, what kind of storm would they stir up within the Xiao family, even if they were to be servants? But who knew when a huge change would occur? How could Xiao Qinyu bear such a risk? Seeing Xiao Qinyu's reaction, everyone understood. Hypocrite. Disgusting. Luo Kadi spat on the ground, full of disdain. Xiao Qinyu, you are really too hypocritical. Xiao Qinyu, you are a hypocrite with a mouth full of righteousness and morality. You still have the cheek to say such beautiful words. Are you still human? A wave of curses came like a tide. It had to be said that when women scolded people, they were definitely much more vicious than men. And they were eloquent and agile. In an instant, all of Xiao Qinyu's grandchildren were cursed at least once. All 8 generations of ancestors were also cursed. There was definitely no one left out. The muscles on Xiao Qinyu's face twitched. Finally, he waved his hand and said, everyone, attack with all your might. Kill them all. Yes, Chen Jianlong had been waiting for this order for a long time. Wu Jueqing was furious. He said calmly, Xiao Qinyu, looks like you really don't know what's good for you. Since that's the case, I will let you have a fight here. Let's see how many people my poison can kill. Chu Luo answered and came out. Her slim figure stood on the snowy ground. With a smile she said, I also have some poison here. With a wave of her hand, another wave of greenish-blue smoke flew out. It merged with Wu Jueqing's smoke. A wave of poisonous smoke suddenly expanded to hundreds of feet long and became a wall of smoke. It stood between the two sides. Chu Yang laughed. The few of us naturally have to teach the 8 super clans a lesson. The situation was suddenly on the verge of breaking out. Xiao Qinyu's pupils contracted. The murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly there was a long howl. A clear voice said, I am the ruler of the world. I am the king of all rivers and mountains. When this voice came out, the faces of Jia and Jia twisted at the same time. It was not out of fear or wariness, but some disgust. This brother is really endless. Will you die if you don't say this when you appear? Even the muscles on Wu Jueqing's face were twitching. A green aura suddenly rose up, and Dukyu appeared in a carefree and unrestrained manner. He stepped on the green vines in this world of ice and snow, and walked over with lotus blooming with every step he took. He arrived in the middle of the confrontation between the two armies, and smiled in a carefree manner. Brothers, I trust you have been well since we last met? Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dong Wushang sighed repeatedly. Mo Tianji looked bitter. You're howling. Tan Tan stood in the void. He waved his big hand and shouted, This place looks pretty good. I've decided to kindly accept it. Our 3 Stars Divine Clan will return to the Jianghu from now on. We will enter the Double Heavens continent. This snow-covered northwestern region will be the territory of our 3 Stars Divine Clan from now on. In this territory, every living person is a member of my 3 Stars Divine Clan. Furthermore, all the wealth in this land will belong to my 3 Stars Divine Clan. Tan Tan's black hair fluttered and fluttered in the air. He then shouted loudly, This king has issued an order. Who dared to disagree? Little ones quickly shout the slogan. The experts of the 3 Stars Divine Clan responded subconsciously. The Holy King's order shakes the heavens. He commands the world. No one dares to disobey. They shut their mouths after shouting. This thing is really too embarrassing. How did we end up with such a king? Xiao Qinyu's face was heavy. Looking at the unusually arrogant and domineering 3 Stars Divine Clan in the sky, his heart was filled with endless worry. The 3 Stars Divine Clan had actually come out of the secret land, and there were so many peak experts. And now, they were even claiming to occupy the northwestern region and rule over a piece of land. This was big news. It might not be inferior to revealing the identity of the Calamity Sword Master. Old man, you're the leader over there. What do you think of our 3 Stars Divine Clan's decision? Very wise. I mean, this Holy King's decision is very wise. Tan Tan looked at Xiao Qinyu disdainfully. Do you have any objections? Xiao Qinyu took a deep breath. Although he had only met this 3 Stars Divine King for a short time, he was already clear that this guy was definitely an extremely unreasonable existence. As long as there was a disagreement, he would go to extremes. He might as well ignore him. He quickly weighed the situation of both sides. Finally, he sighed dejectedly in his heart. In the current situation, the Allied forces no longer had any advantage. If they rashly started a war, these people on the Allied forces' side would very likely be buried here. If they retreated now, they wouldn't be able to get any wealth. It would be a loss of face. But if they also couldn't get any wealth after the war, they would lose their lives. But the other party's words clearly meant that he didn't want to start a war now. That was why he asked that question. That sentence gave both sides room to maneuver. Each side had a way out. The 3 Stars Divine Clan had just come out. As the hero of a region, they definitely needed a base as a foothold. This place had just lost the high-level experts of the Li clan. They could take advantage of this situation. This was the first reason. The foothold needed a deterrent force. If they started a war now, the 3 Stars Divine Clan would definitely suffer losses.